Well, welcome in everybody to the tournament here today. I'm joined by the lovely HomeSliceHenry and TomahawkUK. Henry and Fareed, how are we feeling today?
Honestly, feeling great. Very happy to be here. I am excited to see because we've had a couple weeks off from competing. People obviously got to spend time doing some traveling over the holidays, and that downtime can give people some time to think through the meta, figure out what they want to run. So I'm excited to see what new strategies emerge now that these competitors have had a few weeks off.
I think everyone's going to be really excited to see what teams people are coming up with. I think that there's a lot of opportunity now to run completely different templates, completely different cores. So I think everyone's going to be quite interested to see who comes out on top today.
Well, if any of your guys' holidays are how Henry was describing it, go home with the family and then just immediately start thinking about those teams that you want to bring to play Pokemon, right? Just off a quick glance of the bracket, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but I will. It seems like Toxapic's usage has gone up quite a little bit, and I'm curious to see if that's because of the jump left going up in usage as well in Toronto.
Jumpluff, it's a very scary Pokemon. Even against something like the Shadow Drapion, where you're taking super effective poison stings, Jumpluff can definitely feel like it can hold its own. Especially if it's up one or two fairy winds, things can get very uncomfortable very quickly. So it does make sense that people are opting for it a little bit more, just to try and have something that can shut this energy down and just take a lot of hits. Similar to how when Gligar was everywhere, we saw a big uptick in Pokemon like Skarmory, just as a way to have one very good check to that Mon on your team.
I wouldn't be surprised if we know that Azumarill is immensely common, and we also know that Corsola is on the rise, and that's inviting you to bring perhaps a Dark type Pokemon or a normal as well as Diggersby. And Toxapex can often be some of the best core partners for those kinds of Pokemon as well. So I wonder if it's a byproduct of this Azumarill Corsola we're seeing a lot of as well.
Right. Another incredibly bulky Pokemon as well with Toxapex and Corsola pairing, as you said, those two go well together. Another Pokemon that I'm don't know if anyone brought, I think one trainer in this tournament, just off first glance, is Dachshund as well. Recently released, I believe, 2 days ago, a Charm user have access to both very low costing charge moves of Psychic Fangs and Body Slam. So I wonder if anybody's going to be able to put that to use out of the 80 trainers that we have registered today for this practice tournament.
80 is quite significant. And Dashbun, it's with Psychic Fangs and Charm, it's obviously going to be very, very strong in the 2 shield. But considering it is a Show 6 style format, needing to commit 2 shields to one Pokemon to have it be that level of success, will that be a bit of a limiting factor? Because we know it can be strong, but it feels like you'll have to kind of structure your specific line of 3 around that strategy. Because Dashbun's win rate, due to the fact that it doesn't really have those hard-hitting charge moves unless you opt for Play Rough, does significantly drop the fewer shields that you have for it to hide behind.
It's going to be an interesting one because it's actually going to be one of the bulkiest Charmers that we've got available. Access to Psychic Fangs as well means Charms are really going to pressure. I quite like that they've not given it coverage really against the field, so it's not like it's going to be too oppressive, I wouldn't think. And then there's also the question of whether or not Wigglytuff is going to have the same presence that it has by being a normal type as well. So it's not like it's going to be the sole Charmer that is available to players either.
Yeah, Dachshund is one of those interesting Pokemon where the HP looks pretty low, but the stat product makes up for that lack of HP that it has there. Incredibly bulky, and I wonder if Inadequance would consider dropping Wigglytuff off of his team in place of a new Charmer joining us here. But the tournament has been running for quite a little bit here. We are on round 3, I believe, so we can go ahead and head over to the standings to see where everybody falls at right now.
Okay, so these are the first 2 rounds, and this is a massive tournament. HaydonusActual, you've done really well getting this many people in as well. So we've got some very familiar names going across it. Henry, is there anyone that in particular that you want to draw attention to that you've seen?
I do see Chillis FM in this tournament. He typically only competes in the regionals that are in the state of Texas. but I believe he did make top cut in his last one, so he hasn't competed in many, but in his most recent one, he was able to secure a top cut. So I'm very interested to see how he's able to do, and if we'll see him in San Antonio, which I believe is one of the regionals coming up in January.
Very nice. And I'm already seeing, look, we've got Emmy Weedle, who did so well in the last of these tournaments as well. He's actually already dropped in round 2 to Pranav. That is a big win. Pranav's obviously a great player as well, but we're seeing Rise to Occasion, Jamie McElwain, lots of other players that are very, very familiar, but this is all to play for. We're in a completely new meta here, I think, because we've had now, I would say Corsola is much more available than it was by Toronto. I think a lot more players have had the opportunity to try and hatch and or trade some. Lots of players are using Lucky Corsola if they've not able to trade themselves a high rank one. And Henry, I think you're someone that has used a lower rank Corsola, you know, one with maybe hatch IVs. What would you say the difference has been for you?
So it can still do a decent amount of what you want it to do, but you can absolutely tell when you're battling against a high rank Corsola, because there are definitely going to be certain matchups that are going to play somewhat similarly, but having that extra bulk, even though you do sacrifice a few CMP ties, like a Lucky Corsola can actually cap Tai Dugong, whereas the more optimized one cannot. The extra HP can be helpful in a lot of situations. Specifically, a Lucky Corsola ties Azumarill in the zeros, whereas an like more optimized one can land 2 Nightshades, tank 2 Play Roughs, Astonish down, and leave with a move. And that's something that a Lucky one cannot do. So I definitely, like, the highest rank of Corsola possible that you can get, definitely going to be worth it. But obviously, trying to find people to get those trades done is definitely going to be the biggest obstacle. And that's the thing that's holding me back. So currently I am rocking a 13 attack Corsola until I get something better.
Yeah, I think for many people, you've got to maybe think about what are the events you're going to be playing in. Is it something that you're looking to use? For example, have you got a January event, or are you waiting for EUIC? And what is the best course that you can use? Because I think it's probably better to just build something, practice with it, use it. Yes, you might lose a couple of matchups if you don't have the highest rank one, but it's such a good Pokemon that it's better to have something than nothing, maybe.
That makes sense. Just having the Pokemon, and the nice thing is if it's a Lucky Corsola or like a Hatch IV, it's not very expensive in terms of XLs, and I believe it's a 3-kilometer buddy, so it's not the worst thing in the world to walk overall. But yeah, that's just having one in general is a good start, but you are going to want to, if you build one of these like Hatch IV ones, you're definitely going to want to rebuild one in the future. Oh, it looks like we have some round 3 results here. Ashton Ash doing quite well so far in this tournament. And I believe we saw Rise, who's now 3-0 up at the top. So Rise also getting some 2-0 wins. So Rise making quick work of the competition so far.
And I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of these players feature on stream very, very soon. I think loads of people will be very interested to see what kind of teams and compositions that people are coming up with. Because I think coming out of Toronto, I would probably say that in my mind, Shadow Drapion and Azumarill, that core was incredible. And I think probably going forward as well, it might be the core to beat. But we're also seeing, obviously, we know that Toxapex and Diggersby is very good. We saw Corsola and Annihilate, actually, not just Corsola and Primate, but Corsola and Annihilate were actually working very well together as well. And there might be different combinations of all of these cores. We've got Pokemon like Jumpluff that has been very disruptive. Shadow Kanto Marowak is obviously a big threat as well. And I guess the question is that whether Birmingham is obviously coming up very soon, but it's going to be the weekend of a Shadow Rocket event.
Oh,
So will we get accessibility for Kanto Marowak and maybe some Drapion as well? That's the question.
That would be very nice. That would be very nice, because I know quite a few competitors who just purely just to have the Shadow Drapion, they are running some truly atrocious IVs because they know how strong this Pokemon is, and just having one, even if it's like a 1474, is still such an advantage because it offers such tremendous neutral play, and having Shadow Marowak would be absolutely terrific to see. One thing I'm curious about is, will these Pokemon be in the top usage? Because I believe we have actually compiled usage data for this tournament as well. And we got our first reaction, and who's at the top? None other than the king himself, Shadow Drapion, and Annihilate at 50%, Corsola at 35%. And that's something that I do think that is is worth looking at is that specific duo ghost core of Corsola plus Annihilate actually cover each other's weaknesses very well outside of a Pokemon like an Air Slash Mandibuzz, and both of those form a really good trio pairing with that Shadow Drapion.
I mean, I think that a lot of players have realized that of the fighters, Annihilate is probably the strongest pick at the moment. There were some players that were opting for Primeape. We've obviously seen some Pangoro as well. I think Annihilate just happens to be the most reliable, and so it makes sense that its high usage is probably because other fighters aren't featuring quite as much.
And as we take a look through the other Pokemon on this list, we see the Azumarill, which has been honestly throughout the past 6 months or so, very, very high usage across the board, like usually within the top 3. Diggersby, and that could also explain why we saw a lot of Toxapex. It's obviously not in the top 12, but Diggersby forms a very good core pairing with the Toxapex. There's Clodsire, Feraligatr, the ever-present Jumpluff, Superior, and Talonflame, and Dunsparce. I do think that Dunsparce, looking across the board, there are a lot of targets for it, but then when you see the Annihilate and Diggersby, it feels so helpless in that matchup that I can understand why people want to bring it, but it really feels like you have to try and cover very well against the Annihilate and Diggersby, and that oftentimes can be a bit of a difficult duo to try and cover for together.
What do you think about, obviously, Bibarel? We've seen a few of them being used in Toronto. I think a lot of players saw that you can do very well with it. Some players might not like the style of play that it offers. It's not quite as bulky as you maybe think it is or want it to be, but it does have so much better play into the Azumarill. It can also hit Diggersby and Clodsire very hard as well.
I do think B-Barrel does offer a lot more neutral play in that some of the matchups where Dunsparce struggles, you can actually hit back. Like, obviously, Annihilate's still going to be a very difficult matchup, but a Surf will inflict a lot more damage than a Drill Run. And against Diggersby, you are a rollout user that can actually hit that Pokemon for super effective damage. So I do think B-Barrel is quite interesting. I believe you have to pair it with a lot of bulk overall, because it's really not, as you mentioned, it's not going to take a lot of hits compared to the Dunsparce, whereas Dunsparce, very comfortably tanking any one charge move most of the time, barring like an Annihilate close combat. But B-Barrel, if you hit it with a neutral move, like even a Scorching Sands, you're dealing like around 60, 65%. That's a lot of damage, and that's from a Pokemon that doesn't have a very high attack stat. So I do like B-Barrel quite a bit, but I think it will require careful team roster construction if you're going to bring it, because you really don't want to be in a situation where you have Pokemon like B-Barrel, Shadow Drapion, Annihilate, and just a bunch of these Pokemon that Shadow Feraligatr that all really want shields, and then you're constantly in a position where one of those Pokemon just can't have the shields that it needs in a game.
One thing that I am seeing from this graphic, and maybe this is part of the reason why B-Barrel isn't seeing as much usage as it might otherwise see, is we've actually got 2 grass types here. And I could be wrong, but from memory, I remember seeing a lot of Jumpluff in Toronto. And maybe Jumpluff's presence was at the expense of Superior, but here both Jumpluff and Superior in the top 10 Pokemon. Obviously, at regionals, we often see top 12. Here it's the top 10, and there are 2 grass types. And that is quite telling in my mind. What are your thoughts on that?
I do think a rise in grass does make sense, just because if you take a look across the middle 3 Pokemon on the top, Annihilate, Azumarill, and Diggersby, grass is hitting for super effective or neutral into all of those. So overall, grass can offer a lot of play into the meta. Additionally, if you're Jumpluff is pretty fine into the Drapion. And next, what do we have after that? Clodsire, which is obviously bad since a lot of them are often on Sludge Bomb, but then there's Feraligatr, Corsola, then there's the Dunsparce. So honestly, in this meta, there are a lot of targets for grass. So I definitely do get the idea.
Yeah, and obviously both of them with such good play into the Annihilate, if you can protect them from that Shadow Drapion as well, then yeah, grass really could be a threat. There's not as much of a play for fire. We see a sprinkling of Talonflame, but honestly, Talonflame seems really easy to manage here. So I'm very interested to see which Pokemon really takes the spotlight today. And I think we also have some spotlights for some of the top players that are featuring. So here is Rise to Occasion. Look at this guy. He is competing with the Diggersby Toxapex core that we've mentioned, and he does have a Talonflame on his team. The ever flexible Shadow Feraligatr and Shadow Drapion. And there's my boy. It's Annihilate as well to round things off.
And don't forget the Talonflame. Talonflame is a Pokemon that I believe was only at 22% usage, but I love how it plays into this meta, specifically because it is one of these Pokemon that if you're able to give it a shield advantage, even just up one Incinerate, even on evens, it can flip matchups it has no business flipping. So it's a Pokemon that I do really like because it does offer you a tremendous amount of flexibility, whereas even if everything goes wrong, Talonflame, that Fly Brave Bird moveset is unbelievably strong, and even against something like a Toxapex. I
You know
know
what's
I've
really
been, yeah, I've been the Toxapex before, and if you're down a shield and down an Incinerate, it can feel very bad.
It's scary, isn't it? And I think the difficulty as well, because I've been playing a lot of Talonflame against a lot of Talonflame in the Go Battle League as well. Some players have reverted to Flame Charge, and that's sometimes catching me off here because I'm not expecting them to start boosting through my team. Have you seen any Flame Charge Talonflame recently?
I've seen a few, yes. I know we don't see a lot of Morpeko in the play Pokemon side of things, but specifically for Talonflame being able to boost up its fast attack damage against Pokemon like Morpeko and Annihilate, getting that extra fast move pressure can be very nice because Annihilate and Morpeko both like to hide behind shields, ramp up their damage, and try and run away with the game. And if you're able to match those boosts, then you're in a pretty decent spot. But you know who does not have a boosting Pokemon other than the Annihilate? No Talonflame here, but we will see Annihilate as we have SS Thorn, Toronto runner-up in 2024, 2025 Toronto top 8.
Yeah, SS Thorn. We see him in chat. We see him here on screen. This is an interesting team that he's got. He's got that Corsola Annihilate core that we talked about. Shadow Drapion is just so flexible, and we know that he likes Shadow Kanto Marowak as well. And then Dugong. What are your thoughts on Dugong in this current meta?
I do think that Dugong does offer quite a bit of flexibility. One interesting thing that I note here is we are seeing some lines that people have run in Go Battle League, like the Galarian Corsola, Dugong, and Wigglytuff team, I believe was run by a lot of the GB Lindos. We've, of course, seen a lot of the Dugong plus Shadow Marowak core in Go Battle League, and we've seen a lot of the Annihilate plus Shadow Drapion. So we see a lot of these pairings, the kind of ideas for them begin in Go Battle League, and then they can kind of convert and be brought into this Show 6 Pick 3 style format.
Yeah, Dugong's a very interesting pick. And what I'm also noticing is that we've got 4 Pokemon. Oh, we've changed our mind. SS Thorn, I'm sorry, you are no longer the Bologna regional champion. But we've got 4 Pokemon here that are running 3-turn fast attacks. And then obviously 2 Annihilate and the Shadow Drapion with 2-turn fast attacks. And I wonder, does that give you a lack of flexibility? Does that give you maybe a sense of predictability to your opponents when you are running slightly slower moves on average across your whole team? Is that something that you consider when building?
It's definitely something that I do look at. If you're going to have these slower turn duration fast moves, I feel you definitely want to put bulk onto the team to help compensate for the fact that you may not be able to switch out as quickly. Like if you lead Corsola into the opposing Annihilate and they switch out, you, unless you pause and wait to see what they visually come in, you're going to be behind by several turns, and that can be consequential depending on the matchup. So I do think having bulkier options where you can potentially stay in if they save switch it for Alligator, for example, trade shields, get it low, and then soften it up and send something else in, is a potential option. So I like the fact that he's added a lot of bulk to this team, where in Dugong, Wigglytuff, and Corsola, all 3 of these Pokemon can take 1 hit and sometimes multiple.
Yeah, and I think we've got some other players available to look at as well. I think Colin 6. Let's take a look at Colin. And now this is the Bologna region. Done so well. He's also done so well in 2025. My mic's playing up a little bit, guys. Sorry about that. But look at this team again. We've got another Dugong there, but this time we've gone for the Ariados Malamar. Poison coming in.
Yeah, and one thing that I do really like about this team is specifically the Ariados. Ariados is a little bit of a sneaky counter to all of these Annihilate. You wouldn't necessarily think it on paper. You're like, it's a Poison Sting user going up against a Ghost type. How is Ariados beating Annihilate? But that double resist counter and an ability to pretty comfortably tank a Rage Fist means that you can, in the 0 and the 1 shield, just go straight Trailblaze and command that matchup. And now if we think about a lot of the Pokemon that people like to pair with Annihilate, they are trying to cover for the flyers. So a lot of the times it'll be Pokemon like the Dugong or a Shadow Drapion. And Ariados, especially up energy, can put in a lot of work in those matchups. So I do really like Ariados. I know Ariados had a massive surge in usage right around October, and then its usage kind of fell off a cliff, but I think in January, we should see a nice resurgence of Ariados, as Ariados does feel very strong, and I do like this pairing it up with Malamar and Shadow Drapion and Shadow Feraligatr to deal some damage, and then you have the bulk of the team with Dugong and Diggersby.
I'm very interested to see how players like Colin can perform in these tournaments, these online tournaments. We're actually seeing that Pranav is doing very well. So why don't we go back to the bracket, take a look at how these players are getting on.
Oh, we have a lot more results.
Yeah, so many more results coming through here. And we can see that Ace has taken victory there, as we said, but Pranav here, 3-go as well.
Yeah, as you're mentioning, Rise, I believe 3-0 now. Pranav, I think 3-0 as well. The Masked Asian, who I believe has only competed in 2 tournaments. His most recent one was NAIC, where he was able to get top cut. He's doing very well. So looks like we do have, and Richie, who also fresh off a regional championship, if I'm not mistaken, and Colin. So we do have some newer names and some very familiar names, absolutely dominating through 3 rounds of this tournament.
I'm just trying to check if you guys can hear me okay, because my mic's been playing up a little bit. So hopefully this is a little bit better, or a little bit better. But yeah, we've got so many players here that I think could be, obviously, you know, when you enter a tournament like this, you're not necessarily just going because you want to win this event. Of course you do. It's something that always feels nice to say, you know, you won this little cash tournament. But I think everyone is still really, really interested in what that they want to bring to these major events that they're going to be going. Yes.
And one thing that I do want to make a note of as well, he mentioned it in chat, how could I miss the name, but the Mega Junko. Junko looks like he's doing quite well. He has top cut before in the European regionals. So overall, I'm excited to see, because this is shaping up to be a very stacked group of undefeated trainers as they move into the round 4. And I believe once we move into round 4, that'll be when we'll start showing the battles on stream. So I am very excited to see, because we have some elite trainers rising to the top. That pun was not intended. I do not want to see any eye rolls in chat. That was an accident. It was a mistake, but I will not apologize for it. We have some very good trainers rising to the top. And now we have Haydonus. Welcome in, trainer, as Mr. Tomahawk looks to do some quick open heart surgery on his microphone.
Well, speaking of trainers rising to the top here, I guess I could be considered one of those elite trainers right now coming in. And also Rise, I caught onto that little pun there of yours, Henry. Not sure if I entirely appreciate it, but it was there and spoken into existence. But speaking about rising to the top, we have Pranav now at the top of the DracoViz bracket here as well. Do we have okay. Awesome. Yeah. So current standings with Pranav here at the top is team of Mandibuzz, Azumarill, Annihilate, Feraligatr, Jumpluff, and Drapion. Yeah, now you had mentioned some interesting commentary on the Jumpluff and Superior rising to the top, mainly because of Annihilate usage and Azumarill usage and Diggersby usage all going up, either super effective or neutral damage output there. But I am a little bit curious about the Shadow Feraligatr here. Now, Shadow Feraligatr had dropped in usage since the beginning of the Play Pokemon circuit this season, at least since the beginning of this season. So I'm curious about your thoughts on Feraligatr. Is it still useful, or what are your opinions here?
I still think it offers a tremendous amount of neutral play. Even with something like the Shadow Drapion, it's not a particularly comfortable matchup. On even energy, Feraligatr is going to win the charge attack priority tie. If you land a Hydro Cannon, you can just Shadow Claw down eventually. So Drapion, unless it's up energy, kind of feels like it has to bait or catch out of it. So I do think that the Shadow Feraligatr offers a lot of play, but in a meta environment where people are trying to run several of these Glacier options, I can't fault people for turning to Azumarill, as Azumarill doesn't quite have that sweet potential that a Shadow Feraligatr can. But I do think overall that the Azumarill does offer just a lot of consistency and a lot of bulk, where outside of Toxapex, it's not really going to run into any devastating matchups.
Right, perfectly said. I do believe that the Azumarill does offer a lot of consistency, especially with that bulk. And what makes Feraligatr and Drapion very interesting picks is their ability to generate two fast moves, or generate to charge moves incredibly quick. You got the Drapion doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and then having the Aqua Tail ready. Might even throw one more Poison Sting and have the Crunch ready there. And then the Feraligatr doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the Hydro Cannon. And their flexibility in being able to swap out. Now, Azumarill is extremely consistent in having bulk and being able to maintain certain matchups for an extended period of time. But Feraligatr and Drapion, although glassy, they are able to leave and fluidly move throughout the entirety of a match and bank energy, which makes them particularly useful.
I agree. They offer a tremendous amount of neutral play and almost a non-linear play style where you aren't necessarily absolutely locked into, if you remember the Noctowl Lantern Trevenant days of old, when alignment was everything and you had to fight for that alignment so your tree did not get absolutely destroyed by a very wise owl. But one thing that I do want to note here is we had mentioned a bit earlier when talking about potential core breakers for this ghost duo of Annihilate and Corsola was Air/Mandibuzz. Now, Pranav, who's 3-0, does have Mandibuzz, but it's on Snarl. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Mandibuzz in the meta and Snarl versus Air Slash.
Well, I think Mandibuzz falls in the similar position of Azumarill, having incredible bulk to go with it and being able to be consistent in that. I do think that actually Air Slash is a little bit better than Snarl. I do appreciate the fast move output from that Air Slash gives Mandibuzz, especially not having entirely high attack either. On Mandibuzz, Air Slash helps it clean up some of those matchups, like Annihilate helps clean up Primate, both of which had gone up in usage, although Primate actually had gone down in usage a little bit this tournament. Also helps with things like Feraligatr as well, the jump left matchup as well. Even Drapion, right, where Snarl is not doing super effective damage, not even neutral damage to Drapion with the Snarl, and then with Air Slash, it's dealing that neutral damage and hitting a little bit harder.
And having been the Shadow Drapion in that matchup when it's an Air/Mandibuzz, after a couple Aqua Tails, you look and you're like, wait, why am I at like half HP and they haven't even thrown a move? Because those Air Slashes do add up, because Shadow Drapion is so used to being able to hide behind shields. So having something that actually has fast move pressure there can actually be very beneficial. But it looks like he has opted for Snarl. I believe SS Thorn in chat mentioned that Air/Mandy does potentially have lose cons against the Galarian Corsola. So that may be what Pranav is going for here with the Snarl. Because obviously Annihilate and Azumarill, not big fans of the Corsola. Corsola, pretty decent play against Jumpluff. A high rank Corsola can beat the Feraligatr and the Shadow Drapion itself. A negative matchup, but Corsola makes it closer than anyone might ever think. So that might be what Pranav is after, is just consistent, quick damage into that Corsola, because otherwise it could be a bit uncomfortable for his team to deal with.
Yeah, well, speaking of Corsola, I mean, the one thing that Mandibuzz does have gunning for it with Air Slash is someone not having the ability to trade for a good one. We've seen a couple trainers in this tournament have fall on the little bit lower of the HP side there. And with their Galarian Corsolas, I myself don't even have one after a good 9 trades there. But speaking of flying types, thankfully Noctowl isn't around anymore, and we transitioned the conversation over to Mandibuzz. But I do also want to touch on Jumpluff a little bit, and that's where I find somewhat of a similarity between Mandibuzz and Jumpluff. Both, well, Snarl and Fairy Wind do little to no damage. At that point, they should be doing 0 damage. Which is what gives Air Slash a little bit more of an edge for Mandibuzz. But Jumpluff doesn't really have that option, although it's generating energy quite nicely with Fairy Wind. and getting to the aerial ace and energy ball nicely, or even the acrobatics, which some might lean towards. Fairy Wind is not dealing a lot of damage output, and I do also think that it's similar to Azumarill in the sense of just having good bulk and being able to withstand certain matchups, even if it's not entirely favorable. Yeah.
I have seen some people testing out, I believe it was Firestar who made group finals in Baltimore with it, a jump bluff with aerial ace and acrobatics. And I believe I saw Tho streaming the other day testing out that moveset as well. Acrobatics, obviously an unbelievably strong move, but a lack of coverage means that you are going to struggle in some of those matchups like Azumarill, where you're very much reliant on being able to try and knock out with 2 energy balls, because a second Ice Beam would be absolutely catastrophic for the Grass Flyer.
Right. And I'm not entirely sure about the aerial ace acrobatics choice. If you were to choose between aerial ace and acrobatics, I would definitely choose acrobatics over energy ball. And recently in GBL, I've actually seen that moveset quite a bit, and it's thrown me off guard for sure. I come into the match with my drop down, I'm like, okay, I can live in aerial ace. I can take 2 of these, barely hang on, get that crunch off. I've already seen the energy ball, so it has to be aerial ace. And then they hit me with that acrobatics, and it's an incredibly unfortunate position there to be in. But the glorious thing about the Show 6 Pick 3 format is having access to the team sheets and knowing if your opponent